On today's podcast, I have a very interesting guest, and we discuss the conscious and subconscious brain, how hypnosis works, and how hypnosis can be used to cure people of chronic and short-term stress. Welcome to Anti-Aging Hacks. On this podcast, I interview top experts in anti-aging and longevity, and we discuss the best natural and medical solutions to bring you practical advice you can apply right now to fight back against aging. We also discuss sneak peeks at some huge scientific advancements coming in the near future that will allow us to age backwards. I am your host, Faraz Khan. Thank you for spending some time with me today. My guest today is Sherly Sulaiman, who is a certified clinical hypnotherapist, a Neuro-Linguistic Programming master practitioner, a mindfulness coach, and meditation teacher. She has 20 years of experience in the health and well-being industry. She founded the Depression Relief Clinic and Inner City Hypnosis in Sydney, Australia, as well as the New Stress Relief, her private practice in Santa Monica, California. Now, I've been interested in hypnosis as a modality for quite a while, for changing your beliefs or getting rid of stress even, or changing your mindsets. And I encourage you to give this one a listen all the way through because we discuss some really interesting tidbits. And Sherly's been doing this for a long time, so she's definitely an expert. Sherly, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you, Faraz. Thank you for having me.
So I've known you for about a year, give or take a few months. You have a really interesting background. Let's start by describing your background to our listeners.
Okay. So I've been a meditation, mindfulness, and yoga teacher for around 20 years. And I've been a clinical hypnotherapist and NLP practitioner for around 15 of those years. In a nutshell, that's my background.
How did you get into meditation, mindfulness, and hypnotherapy?
Well, they're two different areas. So the meditation and mindfulness, I got interested, let's say, in my late teens. And it's not such a happy story because it was a challenging childhood. And because of that, it just made me go on this path of exploration and questioning, I guess. I wanted to know why. I had a very inquisitive mind and what and the how. And I was always intrigued by human nature, the human mind, and human spirit. So I wasn't just exploring meditation. I was exploring really self-help and spirituality and self-improvement from my teenage years. And meditation was a natural part of that exploration. And it became a practice for me personally. And then it became something that I wanted to spread to people because I benefited so much from it on so many levels. So that's really how I got into meditation. Hypnosis kind of fell on my path. I would not have dreamt of being a clinical hypnotherapist, but when I was teaching meditation and yoga, I was also acting back then. But I went through a crossroad when I realized that it wasn't nourishing me in the way that it used to. Once I worked out my stuff, I didn't need the nourishment that I had unconsciously wanted acting to give me, which is the love, admiration, respect I didn't have in my childhood. And once that took place, I knew something was happening that was bigger than me. I was driving to one of my yoga classes. I was teaching the judges in Sydney. And as I was driving this car, if ever there was voice of God, and you can make it a voice of source or from the universe, that was one of the times in my life I heard it. There were 3 times in my life. That was one of them. And it wasn't an audio hearing. It was with the whole of my being. And it said, "It's time." And from that moment, I knew what it meant. It meant that it's time to make that transition, to cross over. And I knew it would be in the industry of healing. I just didn't know what it would look like. And I wasn't attached to anything. And I was thrown into courses. My friends and colleagues would suggest hypnosis courses, NLP courses, psychology courses, it just came together. I honestly felt like I just surrendered rather than was active on this new path. So that's the truth. I'm afraid it's a little woo-woo, but we do live in LA, so hopefully it's okay. And, I just don't know what else to say other than the truth. That's what happened. And that's how I got into hypnosis or hypnotherapy.
So you got into mindfulness and meditation in your teens, I believe you said. So that's pretty early for somebody. And then the hypnosis or hypnotherapy, you got into at what age?
I got into that later. I got into that when I was starting from around late 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Until a few years ago, hypnosis was, to me at least, some Eastern mumbo jumbo. And then I researched its origins one time, and here's what I found. It originated in 1700s by a physician named Franz Mesmer, who used magnets as part of his hypnosis. And because his name was Mesmer, the term mesmerize was coined from it, describing hypnotherapy, which is a fun fact.
Yes.
But regardless, that hypnosis technique was rejected back then, and he was called cuckoo.
Yes.
Finally, in 1960, hypnotherapy got recognized as a valid psychological treatment by the American Psychological Association. So before we get into how it works, we should probably discuss the workings of the human brain. Shirley, could you describe the conscious and the subconscious brain for us and the interplay?
Sure. Firstly, I want to demystify it. The conscious and unconscious mind is the same mind. It's our brain. But the conscious is around the 3 to 5% part that we use consciously. It's our modern brain. And the unconscious is the more than 95% part of our brain that people often say we don't use. We don't consciously use it, but it's still functioning. It's very useful for us because we then don't need to think about things that we need for survival, like how do we eat? How do we read and write? How do we drive a car? Right? Once we learn it, it goes into our unconscious because our unconscious mind remembers everything. It's very helpful in terms of for our basic needs and physical survival. But because it remembers everything, it's not always helpful for our emotional and mental survival. Because when we've experienced trauma, it remembers it, and it can affect the way that people behave in the present moment based on past traumas. Now, the unconscious mind is actually, therefore, where a lot of the wound is, where the healing needs to take place. The conscious mind already knows what to do. The conscious mind is the part that says, wow, I got to do better than this, or I don't want to react like this. Why did I overreact to that seemingly innocent comment? The unconscious mind is the part that remembers something that triggers a person, say, with something that happened to them when they were around 7 years old or something. And because it reminds them of that, they then react more dramatically. That's happening in the unconscious. So, yes, hypnosis works in a way that we bypass the conscious mind and we go to the unconscious, the place where the healing needs to take place.
Mm-hmm. So I want to delve into that a little bit more. Thank you for the explanation.
Cool.
Can we reason with the conscious mind beforehand to say, hey, this is something I'm scared of because of an experience that might have happened to me in the past, but can I reason with my conscious mind in a safe environment and then change my subconscious going through the conscious, or is that not possible?
It is possible, and some people can do that. It's just more rare. Some people can do that the way some people can have the discipline to have a wonderful diet or eating habit despite food representing comfort or nourishment to them. Some people can use willpower alone to stop smoking despite being a smoker for more than 20 years. But for a lot of people, they actually can't do it consciously, or they can only do so much consciously. Because honestly, for us, no one chooses to be in emotional suffering. No one consciously chooses to be an addict or to have behavior they don't want. They consciously want to change, and they consciously know what they need to do. Just like a person that is obese or overweight, they know what to do. They know they need to exercise more, eat healthier, eat less. They just can't seem to do it.
That's very interesting. So you can tell yourself all day long that I should eat healthy and I need to lose 50 pounds.
Yes.
But it just doesn't happen because of your unconscious mind calling the shots, really.
Yes. Well, like I said, some people can. And they're the ones that have a strong discipline, willpower, and perhaps less of an emotional connection to food or negative eating habits. So I'll give you an example of that. Say a healthy, well put together person can see that a chocolate chip cookie is just a chocolate chip cookie. And if they're trying to lose weight or be healthier, they know not to eat it. But to another person, that chocolate chip cookie may represent something else. It may be that when they were younger, their single mother who was struggling wasn't around much, but the times that she was around, she would bake these delicious chocolate chip cookies. And they would be her way of representing love and care to that child. Now, that child makes an association between chocolate chip cookies and love and nourishment and care. Therefore, when they're seeking comfort, care, love, they grab and go for the chocolate chip cookie. They want to consciously give that up, but it's just much harder for them. That's just an example of the unconscious associations we can have to things. Now, chocolate chip cookies can represent many other things. Right? It can represent just different forms of addictions or obsessive behavior that unconsciously is associated to something else.
Yeah, that is a great example. And another one I can relate to that we've been together in this situation is public speaking. And for some reason, the vast majority of the population is scared, witless, to get up in front of people and speak. And it's got to be something in their unconscious, because we can reason with each other all day and say, what's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to forget what you're going to say. You're in a friendly environment. Everybody's rooting for you. But still, the fear is just unbelievable.
That's right. That's right. Public speaking is, after all, the number one phobia globally. And often there is a root there, an emotional root, an unconscious association to things like a belief that they weren't good enough, or what they have to say is not important enough, or something happened in their childhood where when they got it up in front of the class or in front of their family, they made a blunder, some sort of mistake, and people may have laughed, they may have felt shame since that time, and it just planted that seed and a belief like, I can't perform in front of people, I can't speak in front of people, I don't speak well, and so on and so forth.
Got it. So one of the ways, there's multiple ways to kind of reprogram your conscious way or your default mode of thinking. One of that is to, complete, as you said, do things over and over and over and over again. So your new neural circuits are formed, and therefore you get used to the new normal. The other way that's really cool is what we're going to talk about today is hypnotherapy, where you bypass the conscious mind or the thinking part, and you go directly to the subconscious, and you're able to reprogram or change it using suggestions.
Yes.
How is that? How does that work in more detail, and how is that an effective healing modality?
Sure. I use a little more than hypnosis because I'm an NLP practitioner. So fundamentally, what I do is, with what I had explained to you in terms of people's unconscious associations, we find out an issue that triggers them, and I find the root cause of that issue for the person. As we discover what that is, we then clear that up. We allow them to learn the lessons. Firstly, even the insight itself is often beneficial. After gaining insight from that experience and seeing it from an objective perspective, they then can begin their healing. And to complete the healing is for them to realize how they can learn and grow from that experience, and how now they can transcend that experience because they're no longer that child or teenager or adult experiencing that trauma or embarrassment. And in addition to that, then the post-hypnotic suggestions follow all of this clearing and healing. So it's a complete healing experience, hopefully. That's what I've been told and what I intend for them.
Mm-hmm. So, that's a great explanation. If you do bypass the conscious mind in that way that you do, is the subconscious ready to accept these suggestions without, I guess, stress, or without revolting against what is being input?
Yes, certainly. If we find a way, which we do through hypnosis, to bypass the critical faculty, the unconscious mind actually accepts all suggestions and it takes things literally. So the more in trance a person is often, the more open they are and the deeper the suggestions can go. It's not always the case, but generally it's the case, because then they continue to stay out of their own way. The unconscious is ready. Remember, the unconscious remembers everything. And if you just give it the suggestions, it will take it. It's the conscious mind, the critical mind, that gets in the way. That's the part of us that says, no, I can't do that, or no, it's too hard, or there's no way I can be that good. The things that have been conditioned into us.
That's really interesting. I'm totally on board, by the way, on using hypnotherapy for better control of your mind and to reprogram your subconscious. I remember the session that we did together. It was a couple of months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we worked on my mindset about sleep and success. And that was really my first hypnotherapy session. I'd heard all kinds of conflicting information. And I finally, at the end of that session, I got it. And that experience showed me personally why this can be such a powerful healing modality. And Shirley, you did a really great job. So congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you, Faraz. I'm glad you enjoyed it and you benefited from it.
Absolutely did. Now, let me ask you, this leads me to my next point. For a typical client, and I'd wanted this to come from you, and I can obviously fill in some of my experiences, but how does a hypnotherapy session work?
Hypnotherapy works differently based on who's conducting it. So the way I do it is my sessions, as you experience, is really a combination of counseling, hypnosis, a bit of mindfulness, and NLP, Neuro Linguistic Programming. That's how I do it. I first listen to the person, and the listening is not just in the things that they say, but I extract a lot of information through body language, their tonality, and also different things such as what they value and how I can leverage what they believe in and what they will respond to for their benefit, for their healing. So that's really the first half of the session, or sometimes longer. And then I go in there based on all the information I continue to collect about that person. I'll then use it all for them. Because if someone doesn't want to change or they're not open to it, it doesn't matter how good you are or how good of a session it is. They're simply not going to change. Right? They're determined not to, or not to go in trance. So I will do everything I can to make it easier for them and to lull them into trance, if you will. Relax them into it.
I definitely remember we spent the first half of the session we had together, and you elicited my goals and why I was there and what I was looking to achieve from the session. And then we talked about a lot of those, and you asked me some qualifying questions, and we got into more details so you could understand better what I was trying to do. And then after all of that, we got in the session, and it was such a calming experience because to me, as I lay on your, the couch?
Couch.
As I lay on your recliner, and you prompted me with your suggestions to completely relax, and I could feel, section after section of my body completely going at ease. And at the end, even my mind, which is super active and hyperactive sometimes, conscious mind, it just calmed down so much that I was in a trance and I could feel it. And I was in control, of course, but I could feel myself in a trance and being open to a lot of your suggestions. And for example, you helped me with overcoming resistance to my sleep, or some of the statements I was making about, I don't sleep well, and this is something from my childhood, and you helped me overcome that resistance. And no, you sleep well, and you're going to sleep well from now on, and you're not going to stress about it. And so that was really, really interesting, and I got a lot of that session, so thank you.
Good. My pleasure. And it is like that often a lot for people where their conscious mind is still there, but it's just their unconscious mind is the one that's driving the session. It's kind of like in trance, the unconscious is behind the wheel. The conscious mind is still in the vehicle, and the conscious mind is a backseat driver. You know, it's one of those that wants to go, no, take the left lane, cut through.
Yeah.
That's the conscious mind. But the conscious is the one that has taken over the wheel going, I've got this, don't worry, you know, and it's actually directing the vehicle.
Yeah, I'm a big fan now. I'm all in on hypnotherapy.
Good.
Shirley, how many sessions would a typical client, and we'll get into why your clients are coming to you and some of the conditions you treat, but how many typical sessions does it take for a client to feel improved?
Improved from the first session, they'll feel it, just like the way you felt it for us, from the first session, because generally I like getting them into such a relaxed state. You don't need to be relaxed to be in trance, but I find it's a much more pleasant way of going about it. A most effective way. So that's from the get-go. But in terms of how many sessions a client typically has, it really depends on what they want and how they respond to the treatment. And what they want can change with time. You know, someone could come in thinking it's about insomnia and then realize the insomnia is happening because their inner wisdom is trying to tell them an even more important message. Like, hey, pay attention to, you know, this issue that you haven't faced that's getting in the way of you having the happiest life you can have. You know, and that is very important. So it doesn't want to give it up until that person pays attention. So this is an example of how one thing can lead to another. Now, what I found has happened organically is that more than half of my clients now see me the way that they would see a therapist. They actually find this to be a very effective therapeutic session. And I often hear, wow, I covered more and cleared more, healed more in our few sessions than I have in 5 years, 10 years, sometimes 18 years or more of therapy. And so they want to just do this, or they do their talk therapy in addition to our hypnosis session. And I'm not saying anything's wrong with talk therapy. I think it is beneficial for many people that align with it. But that's just the response that I've had from my clients. So more than half of them like to see me regularly. And regularly can be once a week or once every other week, or sometimes we just, you know, keep going from a week to 2 weeks to every 3 weeks, and then monthly for refreshers. But sometimes if it's for something specific, like smoking, in 2 to 3 sessions, it's gone. And if that's all I need, I kind of tell them, you don't need to come back anymore. That's it. You're here to be free from smoking, and you're free from smoking.
That is amazing. And I've heard of that smoking use case and others as well with NLP, which is by itself a very strong technology. And if you're using hypnotherapy and NLP together, I can just imagine how much stronger they would be together as well.
Yes, I find they complement each other very effectively.
And just for the audience, Shirley, what's the difference between NLP and hypnotherapy?
Hypnotherapy is the hypnosis. And some people just say hypnosis, some say hypnotherapy. So it's the part where post-hypnotic suggestions are made and you go into trance. NLP stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming. And that's a system. It's not old. It was created fairly early on in the early 70s by Richard Bandler and John Grinder. And let's see. So we break this down. Neuro Linguistic Programming. So it's really a reprogramming of your neurology through the use of linguistics or language, just to simplify it. That means this is the part where I observe what you're saying, how you're saying it, using your body language, and using all the information that I can gather through NLP for you. Neuro-linguistic programming is the gathering of information part and the processes that are still both conscious and unconscious. And then the hypnosis in my sessions seals the deal, if you will.
Well, that's great to know. Now, is this covered by insurance?
Unfortunately, it is not covered by insurance in the US. It is covered by some insurance in Australia, in Sydney, where I grew up and where I first started to open my practice. But for some reason, it is not covered in the US, it seems, for the most part.
Is talking to a therapist covered by insurance, Shirley?
Sometimes it can be, and other times it is not either, talk therapy. So it depends on the person's insurance.
Okay, so now that we know that hypnotherapy is a valid healing modality for the mind, you focus in particular on using hypnosis as a technique to help individuals beat stress. Why is that so?
Stress is one of those areas that can be really ambiguous. So I just want to say that first, because I don't want to demonize stress. There are two kinds of stress. There's, quote, good stress, which is known as eustress, eustress. And that's the kind of stress that we feel when we are embarking on a new adventure, falling in love, doing something exciting, and it's from the word euphoria. So that's that good stress. Bad stress is de-stress, distress. And that's the stress that we feel when our brain translates something as a threat. Then we start to go into fight or flight, and it's a whole nother experience. And this is really interesting because the truth is we physiologically react in the same way. The only difference is how our mind translates one experience to the other. To know this is really valuable because then you know, really, conceptually, theoretically, at any time, we can reframe something that our brain is saying is a threat when we know it's not a physical threat as good stress. And I've done this with a lot of performers. They have the stage fright, singers, actors, and they feel the heart pumping, the sweaty palms, and all of that going on. And I teach them to reframe that reaction as excitement. Anxiety and excitement feels the same. And the amount of time singers have said, that was brilliant. It works so well once they learn how to do it. Then it becomes a tool for them. So why hypnosis is particularly effective is hypnosis is all about the mind, firstly, and NLP. So if you can reframe the mind, then you allow your mind to be your tool rather than something that's detrimental. Does that make sense?
Yep, makes a lot of sense. Recently, or a few years ago, the CEO of the American Psychology Association said that chronic stress is becoming a health crisis in America, at least. I assume, well, there's two types of stress, right? There's the acute stress that happens in response to something in your environment, or for me in particular, I go work out. That's a short-term acute stress. Or I fast for 16 hours of the day, that's a short-term acute stress. But it ends, and there's a path beyond it where you're relaxed. And then there's chronic stress, which a lot of America is dealing with, which it just never ends. So it's just low-grade or even high-grade stress almost every waking hour. And that can cause a lot of damage to you. For your clients, are they coming to you for chronic or acute? And what are the typical causes of this stress?
For my clients, they're typically coming for both. I have people that experience acute stress and some that experience chronic stress. And the typical reasons are not only stresses, which are things that happen in life that triggers the stress, but we're also living in a time where generally people are experiencing more stress. We have a significant stress increase for the first time in many years. And it's attributed partly to what's happened with media and social media, especially social media. People aren't getting a break now, whether it's work, whether it's people at school. In fact, you have younger and younger people experiencing chronic anxiety now. That's becoming an epidemic as well. It's because with the social media, not only do they feel the pressure of needing to live up to a certain standard, they don't shut it off. It's constant. the expectations, the image, the facade, all of that. And with work, now people aren't accepting, for example, if you're going away on vacation, that you're not going to be accessible. We now have the technology that we are expected to be able to be on our phones or our laptops, whether we're flying or on vacation or wherever we are, which is different. So while technology has a lot of advantages, it also has its disadvantages when we don't know how to have boundaries or turn it off at appropriate times. The other thing with chronic and acute stress is when something happens and it triggers them. I spoke a bit about something triggering them. That stress becomes exacerbated. Suddenly, it's not just about handing in that work on time. It's that if they don't hand in this work on time, it means that their self-worth is threatened. It means that they are not good enough. It means, all these deep-seated core beliefs that they may be carrying, that one thing triggers.
Makes a lot of sense. I've been in those situations myself, working in corporate America. I remember there were weeks at a time where I had anxiety and stress from work-related tasks that were held up for some reason, but I can completely understand an email or a phone call can trigger that, and then that lasts for quite a long time. And for us to have the tools to beat it, fight it, get rid of it, or just sidestep it would be unbelievably helpful, because I realize how hard those few weeks were.
And I want to say something about that, Faraz, that could be helpful. We have a brain that hasn't evolved in the last 200 years. So when something triggers our fight or flight, in the olden days, it would be something like a saber-toothed tiger, a lion, bear. The danger is clear. And we will run up a tree or find ways to escape or hide and survive. When we see the tail of that beast, it's a visual cue to our brain that all is well, the danger has passed. In today's times, we don't have that same clarity. So danger, as you experience yourself, can be this project or this work thing or this deadline or the clients, right, or the relationship or our health. It's so much more ambiguous. Or to a student, their image to be accepted, and so on and so forth. That is what is now translated as, quote, a threat in our mind, which, remember, that means it's bad stress. Now, because we don't have the same clear visual cue as the tail of the beast or that danger has passed, the mind doesn't know how to turn itself off. It doesn't know, hey, has the danger passed or are we still in danger right now? Just in case, let's just be alert and aware, because all the fight or flight wants to do, the amygdala wants you to survive. So to always pick the choice that seems to make sense for your survival. And as a result, we experience chronic stress or chronic anxiety. And that's also partly why it's so prevalent these days.
Agreed 100%. Stress as measured by the hormone cortisol is incredibly bad for the body. Not only does it affect your mind and your mood, but it also causes high blood pressure, high blood sugar, weakened immune system, fertility problems, and also weakens your organs. And as we know, an unhealthy mind and unhealthy organs will cut down your life expectancy significantly, which is something we aim to fix, especially on this podcast.
Yes. On that note of the cortisol, that's exactly what used to get released to give us the adrenaline and the energy to run away from the beast and the threat. And remember, because now it's not a beast or a threat, the cortisol is released in the same way, but we don't have an outlet. We don't need to climb a tree. We don't need to run away for our lives. So we're just experiencing the cortisol. And it doesn't know where to go. It doesn't get expended unless we exercise. That's actually one of the most effective ways to resolve the cortisol release.
Are you finding, Shirley, that as you work with folks that have stress, the more you work with them, the deeper you're able to go to resolve their issues or whatever their patterns are in their mind? Or do they need to come back to get to a baseline every time? Like, how does this work with hypnotherapy? How deep are you able to go, and is it progressive?
Again, it depends on the person and how they respond to the treatment. Because as with anything, I'm not just doing something to them. They too need to get involved. They need to surrender. They need to remain open and allow me to do it. And I always see this as us working together. You know, we're going on this journey together. And so even though people can still have ups and downs because that's a part of life, the intention is their default position continues to increase. So they don't go back to the same baseline. The baseline is what increases in terms of contentment, happiness, peace of mind. But they can still have the stresses up and down. They're just reacting less and less to it.
Now, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Apart from hypnotherapy, which is an amazing modality, what are your other top 2 anti-aging hacks or tips for our listeners?
Well, I can't move from the power of the mind. And it doesn't have to be hypnosis or NLP. It's just the power of our mind. We have this amazing tool available to us, and we barely touch the surface of what it can do. So in terms of anti-aging, we can think ourselves into being younger. What does that mean? It could mean what is best suited to you. I once did a meditation class called The Fountain of Youth. I was asked to do it. And I allowed a person or people to get into trance and create this fountain of youth that's most suitable to them. And as they're enjoying it in whatever way that they could be swimming in it, drinking it, I got them to imagine what it would look like and how it would feel like for them to feel youthful, the vitality, visually, and all this wonderful stuff that goes with youthfulness. Yeah? And that's an example of how powerful the power of the mind can be. It doesn't even need to be about hypnosis, but of course hypnosis helps. The other thing is probably very much in line with what we've been talking about, which is let go of the bad stress as often as you can and as much as you can. And if you experience it, find ways to expend it. You know you're releasing cortisol, then do the exercise. And exercise doesn't have to be hard. It can just be a walk, for at least 20 minutes, ideally. Because we know that stress ages you more, lowers your immune system, all the things that you say, which are all aging traits. So obviously, the less you stress, the healthier, better you feel, and younger you feel.
Great, thank you. I would love for you to do that Fountain of Youth meditation class again, and I am coming for sure. It sounds fabulous.
You'll be the first to know about it. I will invite you to that.
I'm going to tell everybody about it as well.
Okay.
And
yes, it was fun.
Yeah. So Shirley, you're based in Los Angeles and you have a private practice in Santa Monica as well. Where can our listeners find you online?
They can find me on one of my 2 websites. One is SherlySulaiman.com, spelled like my name, SherlySulaiman.com, or the name of my business, which is New Stress Relief, NEWSTRESS, Relief, RELIEF. That's the website. They can find me on Instagram under Sherly Sulaiman LA or New Stress Relief. And there's a Facebook page, which is New Stress Relief.
I know that we can literally sit here and talk for hours about all of these awesome modalities, but I do want to respect your time. Thank you for coming on the show. I will link to your website and information in the show notes for this episode. So thank you for coming on the show, Shirley.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You can find all the information we discussed in this episode and links to studies in the show notes at antiaginghacks.net. To make sure you get notified of new episodes, please subscribe to the podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram at antiaginghacks and on Facebook at facebook.com/anti-aging hacks. And now for the disclaimers. This podcast is for general information purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. Please seek the advice of your health professional for any health or medical conditions.